beautiful people. This is Nampilo Gumede, the Powerhouse. I'm so happy that you tuned in this Monday on this show. It's been a tough week, hey? I must say, it's been a hectic week. It felt like a horror movie. We've had so much trauma, and I hope you're keeping well with your family. So remember to follow us on our platforms. We're on TikTok, we are on YouTube, we're on Instagram, and we are on Facebook. So follow the Empowerment Podcast, and then we'll follow you back. It's Men's Month, so I thought, let me bring someone who is everybody's favorite. His name, oh my goodness, how do I introduce this guy? He's the reason why people still continue to become chartered accountants. Actually, everyone, when you mention Khaya Sithole, it's like, wow, you really know this guy. So I worked so hard to get hold of him and make this time to chat about everything, about what's happening now, about what was happening, about who he gets his passion from. So Khaya is just such a young, inspirational guy, and I just couldn't think of any better person for a Monday morning. And remember to tune in to our episodes in the Men's Month. I hosted Mzamo on mental health. I also hosted Bendulo on entrepreneurship, on how you get started, and he's already made his millions with just being a business guy at such a young age. So Khaya, welcome to Power Monday. Boo, 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 boo. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you.
Khaya, welcome. Tell us who Khaya is. I know you're all over the media. You're on newspapers, you're on TV. Like, there was a point where my family used to call me every time you're on radio, but now they've stopped because they realized that you're big to stay.
Awkward. I'm a part-time accountant. I think that probably is the one way to look at it now. But I mean, look, I do a lot of writing. I enjoy writing. So when I was much younger, I actually wanted to be a teacher, and I wanted to study, English literature.
You're still young, by the way. I just thought, then you just throw it.
I'm vaccinated, so according to the government, I'm not that young anymore.
Oh. Well, I don't qualify
That's how
yet.
they evaluate us. Yeah, I'm much older. So I think when I was young, I obviously wanted to do something very different. And as time went on, I then discovered that, maybe there were other avenues that I could explore. And I remember when I got to university, I decided to study. Amongst other options, I thought accounting would be an interesting one. So that's how I started it at the University of Natal, way back when it was still the University of Natal. And after I then decided to obviously stick on that journey, and I managed to finish that. And later on, around 2010, I then decided to actually go back into teaching. So I started teaching at universities from 2011, and I've been doing that for the past 10 years in one way or another. So it's been an interesting, circle where I started thinking teaching was the way to go, and everyone's saying that no, teaching is not the way to go in South Africa. There's no money. That was literally the reason people used to say that you're going to be poor forever. I was like, but then I did something and still find a way to then do the teaching thing in addition to that. So it's been quite overwhelming at times. There's been a lot of interesting developments and a lot of very interesting lessons. And I suppose most importantly, a lot of people that I've met during that journey who have actually gone on to do remarkably great things that you tend to see every single day. So that's what really makes it interesting and keeps me engaged in it. It's impossible to get bored by it because there's always a new and an interesting story to tell in one way or another. So that's like half the picture. Yeah, that's how I would say.
That is so impactful. That is so wonderful, Khaya. Well done. You're doing an amazing job. But I still have this question for you. You're so passionate about helping people that you had to leave corporate. Corporate, there's money, bruh. Why did you leave corporate?
Corporate is boring, guys. Well, it's very simple. I mean, money was never really the driving motivation behind it. When I first thought about it, I was like, yeah, I can do this. I was very young. I suppose maybe that's an important distinction in that by the time a lot of people have to make those decisions, they are conflicted by the question of consequences. And obviously, just walk away when you have like huge financial obligations. I didn't have those. I'm never a fan of long-term credit, for example. So I'd rather save up and then buy rather than accumulate. So it's always made it easy for me to back and go. And I think even with shifting from corporate, I was like, well, what's the worst that could happen? I could be, always come back. So it made it easier because it was a decision that happened at such a young age. I don't know if people at the age of 35 or at the age of 40 had the same freedoms and I had when I was 24 when I made that decision. So it's obviously a very important distinction there. But I think also the question of what drives human beings, it's things that keep you excited and invigorated and excited about life. And for me, that's never been a question of finances. Just never seen money as the deal breaker. It's not a thing that I wake up for. But I'm always very in seeing the transformation of individuals from one dimension to another. And I think from my own experience, education is probably the one instrument that probably gets many more people to undergo that particular transformation than others. There are other different ways of being there, but I think what makes education or the education sector unique is that it's probably the one that is more inclusive in who can get in and who can thrive in it. While other may have pre-existing barriers to access and pre-existing barriers to entry that make it very difficult to imagine how everybody stands a fair chance of participating in it. And I felt that within the education environment, that's the one dimension where you are closest at equalizing those questions of access and opportunity and obviously success. So that's why for me, it matters more than others. I mean, there's different ways in which people can intervene in social problems and social issues. And I just, from where I was back then, about 10, 11 years ago, I felt that education probably balanced most of these competing considerations around, sacrifices people have to make and the funding needs and also what the long-term effects are, because some initiatives are long-term in nature and the impact is visible for that particular period in time. But I thought that this was the one that had the longer term and the multi-generational benefits for whoever received it. So I felt that was essentially the space I wanted to be in.
Kaya, you're doing great. You're changing people's lives and people are talking about you. And I've actually had an opportunity to meet people and the one word they keep saying is Kaya's amazing. And I'm like, really? Because I knew you were amazing since I knew you as a person, but the impact that you've made and people's lives have really changed. And most of the people that you have worked with, they've actually qualified. And I always see posts on your social media of people thanking you that they wouldn't have done this if you were not there. Even one of my cousins, they were like, Nampila, Kaya? I'm like, yeah, I do. She told me of the impact that you've made in her life. She's going to write her book too. But it's just so amazing that you didn't think of yourself. You thought of anybody else. You thought of, okay, now I'm a qualified chartered accountant. And actually, you're not only a chartered accountant. What else do you do? What else did you do after qualifying as a chartered accountant?
I piss off people for a living. So,
no, you did go overseas. Did you not go to Harvard for something?
No. It was Oxford.
Oxford.
At the time, when I was younger, I actually said I wanted to go and study English literature at Oxford University. That was like the big dream when I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
It had been like the thing that I always said, it's like on my bucket list, I want to do it in one way or another. And obviously back then in 2002, no one was going to pay for me to go and study English anyway. Exactly. And definitely no one was going to pay to Oxford. So that's one of the reasons I ended up studying accounting. So later on in life, I was just chilling and chatting to some friends. And I was like, wait a minute, why have I not gone to Oxford yet? So it was just like, why have I not done that? So what I wanted to do was that I just wanted to have the Oxford experience in one form or another. And what I then that they were running a program at their business school. and it was a part-time program, which meant I could still I've been there from 2018, I think. Yeah, and then I graduated in 2019. And of course, it was like just a very exciting time. I was like, wow, actually, I graduated from Oxford. So it's something that I had dreamt about when I was very young. And for some reason, I'd forgotten about it for a very long time. Until somewhere around 2017, I was like, wait a minute, why have I not done that Oxford then? So it was just one young dream that I said I actually need to capitalize on. So that's what I did a couple of years ago.
I'm learning that our dreams are valid. And Khaya, you're also a political activist, and you were on the forefront of the Fees Must Fall. How was that experience for you?
It was interesting on multiple dimensions. I suppose what made that whole Fees Must Fall experience quite engaging for me was basically the one point that I've always raised, in that, when we do particular interventions and the interventions are done by individuals, I'm actually not a fan of individual initiated interventions. I'm also not a fan of civil society or NGO initiated interventions, because what I've learned over time is that when individuals, either philanthropists or business people or even NGOs, decide to tackle a particular social issue, there is this overriding influence of either the managers, the owners, the donors, or whoever's in charge of the process. And what it does, it puts an element of discretion. And in that element of discretion, people will say, look, we have an interest in solving that issue, so therefore they'll direct resources there. And then somebody else will say, I have an interest in solving that other issue, so they direct resources there. So what you then see is that the basis for decision making is the discretion and that the passions of the donor, rather than the question of what is the issue that needs to be solved holistically. So I found it even with how people run academic support programs or financing programs. You have the best companies or the richest companies in the country saying that they're going to have a bursary program, but within that bursary program, then they pick the brightest of the students. And for me, that intrigued me, because I asked myself the question, well, the reason this funding is important is that it needs to support a person who otherwise wouldn't be able to survive the system. Exactly. And it turns out that kids, we're going to survive the system, so why are you directing them? And at the expense of the people that actually need that additional support structure. So of course, everybody gets to decide where they do their money. So I've always felt that when it comes to what I refer to as first generation rights, for example, the state should still play the leading role in saying that this is an intervention that is done, because the state doesn't have the ability to discriminate between you and I. They're equally responsible to both of us. However, private sector and private enterprise and private individuals call it discretion. So then they decide that you stand a better chance of succeeding than I do. So they invest in you and I get into the system. And what then happens is I get neglected because I have poor results. But me having poor results is as a result of that multi-generational neglect. So of course, I don't get access to higher education, which means that I don't get the type of job that would enable me to make sure that my next generation gets better outcomes. So we cycle 20 years later because you were funded, so you had better opportunities, so therefore your children had better access to education, so then they get compared to my children 20 years later and you see exactly the same outcome. So that's how that's how poverty replicates and multiplies in South Africa, and people are not to break that. So I'm not a fan of discretionary processes, because unfortunately the discretion does tend to be exercised to replicate a privilege, to replicate areas of excellence rather than dealing with underlying issues that equalize the benchmarks across society. So I'm very uncomfortable with that. But it's the way things are, and of course until somebody comes up with a holistic way of changing that mindset, we're going to have to work with the mandate of the people that control the purse strings, and that in most cases achieve outcomes that I think are suboptimal.
Khaya, you're not only clever, you're not only book clever, but you're such a wise guy. We need more people like you.
Oh, there was this other thing that you mentioned. There was another thing you mentioned about political analysts. I'm not such thing. So what I do is that I used to write a lot of nonsense on Facebook. So I used to have opinions about everything. And what then happened is that at some point in time, people would read those opinions and then they'll say, oh, that's an interesting thing. And then they'd engage on it. And then at some point in time, people will say, well, can you come and say on radio what you said on Facebook? I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, it's the same thing. So it's the most weird thing. So then over time, because people, particularly ahead of 2017, a lot of the conversations that people are having were around the political questions. So I'd express my opinions, I'd write what I liked, and I always just say, I write what I like.
Like Steve Biko.
Yes, but obviously life was at stake when he was writing for me. I wouldn't want to compare myself to him. So I used to write what I liked. And then people would say, okay, come and say it on radio. And then some other crazy person would say, come and say it on TV. I was like, okay, whatever. I'll say exactly what I said. So that's how the thing became a label. But I'm just like, guys, I just say what I want to say. So, of course, for some people, it's a trade. It's like a thing that, they do every single day. But for me, no. Sometimes I have an opinion about something and I like to express it. And if somebody says, come and repeat it on another platform, I'm like, okay, I'll repeat it because I stand by it. But it's not for me a thing.
So being yourself has made you be so famous, Khaya. I'm so proud of you. You must continue authentic self. I'm learning.
Let's blame Facebook. It's Facebook that got me into this madness. But yeah, that's what it is.
No, but then that means your views mattered, and that's why they wanted you to speak more about it.
Maybe other people are not talking. I don't know.
Some people are talking, but what you...
Sometimes I sit there, I'm like, why are you guys asking me? There must be other people. But yeah, that's how it happened. But it was just completely accidental, completely unplanned. But over time, it became interesting because you obviously get access to very large platforms, and I suppose with that comes the pressure to then be able to defend the things that you say. So you can't just randomly talk nonsense. So that's what that whole process has been about. So yeah, it's been an interesting.
Wow, I'm thinking you did some other degrees, political degree, to be able to say what you've been saying on social media and on TV and on the newspaper.
And remember, a couple of weeks ago, Esma Khashule came out and put out a statement that says people who have not been in politics should not be analyzing politics. So hey, there's no
yeah. Oh, wow. I'm thinking you really going the political route. But Khaya, I know that you're not going the political route, but you are a chartered accountant and you did economics, gross domestic products and whatever. And with regards to what happened last week in South Africa, what are your thoughts around what happened? Because now businesses are struggling. We actually more fearful, and actually I advise myself to go for therapy. Like my brother is in the police force. I told him that after the whole thing has passed, I need to take him for therapy because he's seen different things. Like when he talks about it, I become so scared. What are your thoughts? Not as a political analyst, but as Khaya Sithole.
Look, yeah, I suppose the difficult part about it is that people lost their lives and we still do not know who lose their lives. And that for me is a great tragedy of it all. But I suppose analytical perspective, the reality, unfortunately, is that this has been predicted by so many people in so many different ways, in that it has always been very clear that the South African social dynamics or the South African social situation was completely untenable. It is just not sustainable in any way that you. So what I've been saying for years, so in fact, last week I actively just stayed out of the hysterical conversations. I did a couple of articles and did a couple of interviews, but nothing beyond that, because I felt that it's become exhausting to try and talk about these things, for people to ignore all of that, and then for them to become hysterical when it eventually materializes. And what I've said in the past is that South Africa's greatest inheritance or what's going is actually the vastness of the land. And when you talk about how vast the country is, my view has always been that what has kept this country going is simply the fact that people who need to revolt about the system for a variety of reasons are so dispersed across the country, it becomes difficult for them to congregate in one avenue, in one area, and actually start speaking out about their issues. Comparatively, when you look at countries where there's been this form of social unrest and social revolutions, one thing that was clear is that they were either benefited from a compressed space in that everybody was within touching distance of us saying this is the point at which we're going to have this conversation, or there was this big trigger point that then forced everyone to say we are now doing this regardless of what the distance or the proximity dimensions were. And South Africa had benefited from the two variables in that we hadn't had that trigger event, which would get a lot of frustrated and excluded people to say, this is the time to speak up. That's the first thing. And the second one has obviously been the question of just how dispersed we are. And in that, it's always been very difficult to imagine there being a one particular meeting point where people are going to say, we are not moving from here until this issue is resolved. So we've benefited from that. What you then saw right now is that one of those two variables was finally triggered, which was the question of, is there a particular event that could be the basis for us saying we have a problem? That's really what happened. So it just turned out that it was a political figure, which is always laden with its own unintended consequences, because then you struggle to distinguish between the political question versus the social question, and they both exist. They definitely coexist at the same time. And what we're hoping to do is that we can be able to really separate the two, and then be able to deal with the big fact that there's a social question that needs to be resolved in one way or another. And the next time we have to have that confrontation should not be triggered by the political question. It should be triggered by the fact that we all acknowledge that something needs to be fixed. And that's what we've been missing for a very long time. So it was tragic, but I think it will be foolhardy for us to say it was completely unexpected, because that's not the case. It's been building up for a while, and it was always rather than if this was going to happen.
Khaya, I really like your analysis. I would call you an analyst. I won't call you that you are political now that I know that you just became famous overnight. But I read the way you think. I was actually reading a book. My husband gave me a book during last week that To Kill a Man's Pride. That as you're saying that this thing is actually a build-up. It just didn't happen. You know, it talks about the people in Joburg and the hostels, the things that they do, that it kills their pride. So with time, I don't want to be too political, but you know, the things that our parents could stand for, my generation will not be able to tolerate. The next generation, my kids will say, you did this to my mom, but we can't deal with this now. And equality, as you just said. So it's just so profound. Khaya, I'd like to just thank you for your time. How can we get hold of you on social media?
Oh God.
Power FM as well. Just let us know.
So I'm on Power FM every evening from 6 to 8 p.m. DSTV channel 889. So that's when I discuss business.
Yeah.
Business. Also on Twitter at Koruska Khaya. That's one. I don't use Facebook as much as I used to, but I still. It just looked like all the conversations were on Twitter. These things change over time, and I am on Instagram, so that's where people can engage and just try and share ideas.
And what's your handle on Instagram?
Korusca Khaya, Koruska Khaya.
Koruska Khaya. Khaya, I'm so happy that I could host you on Power Monday. We're gonna have a good Monday, starting with this bright young man giving us the way forward for the country, making us think about things that were not in our minds. I am Nompilo Yayeye on Instagram, and I've been cooking some conference for the ladies for August. So please follow me on Instagram, Nompilo Yayeye. I'm Nompilo Gumede on Facebook, because the other private account is full. So please join my page, Nompilo Gumede, and just find out what my conference will be about. And please join that conference, and you'll have a time of your life. This is me, the Powerhouse, signing out with Mr. Khaya here. Thank you so much, my friend, for making time. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for the invitation, and goodbye to everyone.
Okay, bye everyone. Happy Monday. Have a blessed week.